Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Tim Angus from Team Merchant Technologies. I was going to say this is my first EDE, so be nice to me, but after last night, you really need to be nice to me.
We'll be gentle.
So I'm based over in the U.S. in Boston. Most people will think of me as the FB guy. That's primarily what I do. And the way I run my business is I try to leave a lot of time off every year that I can spend some time looking about other stuff, doing some research, which is always a lot of fun to me. This summer, what I really decided to concentrate on a little bit is the whole process that I see enterprises go through to deploy apps and desktops. Because I really feel like there's an area there that they need some work. And I think this kind of audience are the kinds of people that are working with those customers and helping them get through their projects. So I want to spend a little time talking about that today and really want to have a discussion, which we won't have unless I figure out how to turn this thing on.
Does it have the dongle?
Yeah, dongles, and I just had to turn the power on. All right. So as I work with my customers, which are typically the larger enterprises are the ones that I usually end up working with, and I talk to them about what kind of practices do they have in place in terms of deploying the apps and the desktops. I get not great responses out of them, okay? They all have something in place. Now, when I started doing training about 10 years ago, they didn't have a lot in place at that point. When I first put up a slide in one of my classes about the process that we go through to do AppV, 3 hands shot up and said, "Can I have that? I got to give that to my boss. They need to see this." And it's not like that today. They all have a process, but the processes they have are not complete. They're not up to date with the way they're deploying things today. There are a lot of holes. They skip it a lot of times. So they really need to button that up a little bit. So that's what I'm hoping we can talk about. And I hope we can have a conversation rather than just me doing all the talking here today. So when it comes to the need to manage this whole process, we have a lot of things that drive the end user customers to deploy new applications. But it's really these effects. The number of people that are involved. The more people that are involved, the more important it is to have a good process down. Particularly as people leave their companies, they go out and a lot of knowledge leaves with them because what they've done in the past isn't well documented. And of course, applications never really die. They just get transformed and redeployed again. So, and enterprises are really bad at retirement of the apps. When I go into a company and they have 300 to 500 apps, there's a very good chance that 10% of them are more than 10 years old. And it seems to be pretty consistent at that. That's the point that they start to think about retiring. And for the large enterprise, it's really the in-house apps that are the worst. Those are the apps that cause them the biggest pain. They can't replace them. They don't have anyone who has a clue how to write those things anymore. And they're going to try to hang on to them as long as they possibly can. So there really is no best practice, is sort of what I've figured out. And I don't think there could be a best practice towards how to deploy these things. Every company is going to have very specific needs. But what they do need to do is have a process down. They need to document that. I think ITIL is a great framework to try to get your ducks in a row, as it would be. And they need to keep it fresh. So I want to break this down into 2 forms. One, which probably a lot of the people in this room more get involved with, which is a project-oriented scenario, where you come in, they're doing some big thing. It's a migration of something to something else. And we have a number of different steps that are involved. There's also the kind of the run-of-the-mill where the business unit requests an application and that needs to be managed. That's a slightly different process, but most of it's the same. It just kind of starts out the same. And typically, you're not necessarily concerned with this retirement phase, but for the life cycle piece, you have to be. Make sense so far? Good. I'm not drunk. Not that drunk. That's good. Okay. All right, so let's go through a few of these. I've got some demos at the end, because I know if you're here, you want to hear something about Happy. So discovery, there's some great third-party tools to just go out and figure out what they are, what's out there. As I go into a company and I ask them for a list of applications, as we're going to go through the project, they really don't have a good list typically. I usually get a lot of stalling on how they'll get me a list, and they get me a list and it's completely incomplete, right? Quite often, I may see about 60 to 70% of the apps that they really need to have in their project in that first list, because they just don't know. So discovery tools are great. There are some free things that are out there. Microsoft ACT, I recently heard from Microsoft, is kind of at the end of its life. And what we have now works well. It can go out, it'll automatically deploy agents out to machines, run inventories, and bring that data back. But where Microsoft is going is with the operation management suite. So yesterday, I know we had a talk, I think it was in the other room, and I have no idea who had that talk. But we had a talk on OMS. They didn't actually hit that part of OMS, but part of the application analytics, which is part of the standard data that Microsoft sucks out of the PC and usually tries to send to themselves, and you usually are blocking that telemetry. But you send that into OMS instead, which is your own private stash, and you can also gain that telemetry through that. Rationalizing, really important. One of the things I found in my career, I mean, I spent a lot of years as a developer, managing teams there. I spent a lot of time in the communication industry, building communication boxes. And I've spent the last 15 years kind of in this space. And everything I've seen along the way is when you get a big process, and particularly if you have multiple people involved, one of the most important things to do is to weed out unnecessary work and problems as early in the process as you can. The earlier you can weed these things out, the less work there'll be in the end. Monitoring tools can be good for rationalizing, so taking a look at things like Operations Manager or any other tools you have that'll tell you what are people actually using as opposed to what they've asked for. And sometimes you just need to ask the business unit just as a double check, because they'll recognize that there are things that they don't need. Wrong button?
Yep.
Okay. When it comes to the more life cycle form, there needs to be some process around how a business unit requests the application. So what do you see being used out there today to do that?
Mail.
Mail?
Or phone call.
Phone call? Oh man, that's bad.
Yeah.
Any company really needs to get to some type of formalized, here is the information that I need. What I'm seeing a lot of, particularly in the US right now, is people are using help desk tickets as a way to do it. ServiceNow has become very popular over there, so that's more of a cloud service form of that. But that's really what they're using to kick off the process today. I'm seeing more and more of that. If this is a new application, there's going to be some type of procurement thing, so there's going to be some other people involved in that to get approvals. But what you're really looking for here is to understand the licensing for that software, make sure that you're going to be in compliance down the road, and also an assessment. Right? Is this application a good fit for what the business unit has asked for? Is it going to work in our environment and the type of technologies we're using to deploy applications? There are some tools that are out there. Citrix App DNA, I'll throw a thing up on there in a minute. Microsoft ACT is again a free tool that you can get that will do a lot of the same kind of assessment these paid for tools will do. Right? They'll give you an idea of what's up with this application, should you see any problems. This is an example of App DNA. Thank God Citrix isn't a sponsor. Because I don't have a lot of good things to say about this tool. It is tuned, actually, you guys ought to love this tool, because it's tuned to show you everything that could ever possibly go wrong with this application. Okay? This is a list of applications which deploy perfectly fine no matter how you try to deploy these things. And we're seeing a lot of red and yellow here. Okay? That's just the way that it's tuned. I think the information that's in here is better for the ISV to look at their application and then go fix those things than it is for the enterprise to be able to make a judgment as to whether or not this is a good fit to push out. The funniest thing on all of this, though, is there's one column here. It's all green. I don't know if you can read what that column is. That's app disks. Amazing. It'll work always on app disks, the one technology that doesn't work at all. And that's simply, they haven't built in very much in the way of tests against app disks. That's why it's green. So I mean, here's kind of the detail you can get. I know this is, that's a little small. It's going to be hard to read. I may even remember how to do this. There we go. Let's go one more. Okay, so this is an app, happens to be one of my own apps. Oh no, I'm sorry, no, this was TechSmith Snagit. Okay, we looked at it. It's telling us this came from the AppV column. It's on the AppV guide. And it's saying, hey, you got some device drivers in here. That's not a good fit for AppV, right? Because it already knows you cannot virtualize device drivers. But when you look at them, you'll see that those are actually DLLs. They are what's known as codecs. And fortunately, some people often call them drivers, but they're not device drivers. These are components that virtualize quite well in AppV and are no problems. But Citrix hasn't quite figured that out yet, so they flag it red for that purpose. It's talking about files that are INI files that have some hard-coded paths in it. And that can mess up AppV if you were to sequence using the PVAD, but that's something that we normally do not do anymore. We stopped doing that about 4 years ago, and VFS will take care of that problem for us, so it really isn't a problem. And it's also talking about some file type associations. I have no idea why they would flag file type associations as being a problem with AppV, but they did, right? That's the kind of thing that ends up in there. This session will be far more fun when I do it with Sheldon LeBlanche from Citrix, who owns that product. We're doing this session at, I want to say Synergy, no, Summit in January. I think when we get to this phase, I'll just kind of step to the side and let him talk about AppDNA.
Without you laughing. Without you laughing.
Hopefully not.
That's recorded. Just use this recording and put what you're saying in when he's talking.
That'll do it. All right. And we get to the app preparation phase. Okay. And there's a lot of different things the enterprise may be doing. They may be doing multiple of these. I quite often, in my work, see the larger enterprise repackaging the vendor's installer in their own MSI. And then deploying that out to some places and then AppVing it for deployment under Citrix. That happens quite a bit. But they may be doing layering, they may be putting things into imaging. But in essence, they need to be able to get that software prepared in the way that they want it to run in their environment, configured properly. And as part of that, they should be documenting that process. The folks that I deal with at AppV are doing a really good job of that these days. days. We usually call it a recipe. It may consist of a Word document with just screenshots of step-by-step, here's how you install it. It could just be a little text file with some instructions, or here are the special things that you have to do with this app. But at some point, it really should get recorded as part of that process. So we get to testing. One of the things that I talk about with customers in this process is, there should be someone that's associated with typically the business unit that's going to really fully test out this application. I'll refer to them as the app expert. I like to reach out to the app expert at the beginning of the project and talk to them and tell them that, hey, this thing's going to be coming down the line. Because every once in a while, they're going to perk up and say, hey, wait a minute, don't you know there's a new version of that? Or, hey, while you're there, could you take care of this problem we have with the current version, because it really sucks. And that word never got out to you, but it's nice to get that up front rather than after they get to this test phase and they have to go back and redo that work. So we'll, haven't seen Alex, so that's good. We can do demos. We'll do demos later on. But this is a screenshot of a tool of mine. So I have a free tool called AppV Manage that I give out that I think is very vital to the process of some of this testing for the AppV packaging. So after we package, rather than drop it on a server or anything like that, we just go over to a machine with the client and we use this tool. It can bring the package in and help us with that early testing process. One of the key features I've added in the last couple of years is this analyzer, which is the button on the bottom left. So we go to our package and we click on it. And that actually goes through and analyzes what is it that's in this AppV application. So we'll break it down into all of the key interface points. So when we bring an application onto an operating system, it wants to interface with the operating system, it wants to interface with the user, and it wants to interface with other applications. And that's what AppV has done lately in AppV 5, is it calls out a whole number of things on the left side here that they refer to as extensions, which are the parts that AppV has now uses to publish outside of the bubble. So AppV 5 is less isolated than the previous version was. And those are the points at which all of those contacts can be made. And I find this very important to understand these things, because this is where the problems happen when you start bringing multiple applications in, or when you start isolating them and you want them working with another application. So we need to understand those things. So those are the things that are called out there. We'll also call out some things like if it plugs into Office. I like to know that every once in a while there's an Office plugin in a package, and nobody really knew about it. So we like to know that up front. There is some yellow that you can see on that screen, which is some of the newer stuff that I've been working on this. The yellow indicates, hey, this is something you might want to look at, right? So in this case, the applications, I click on the detail, we can see that there are some executables in here that have internal manifests that say, hey, require administrator access, right? So if the user's running this and they happen to start that particular executable, which they wouldn't in this case, it turns out, those are things that typically aren't run. A lot of times I'll see things like uninstallers show up in here. But if they ran, they would get a UAC prompt. So you kind of want to know that up front. There's another one down here, UI access equals true. UI access equals true is an interesting one. That's also a setting in the manifest. We don't see it very often. UI access is not well understood, but what it is it's like a tiny elevation. So if you take a process and you're running a standard user and you look at the security SIDs out of Process Explorer, you'll see it's running at what they call a normal level, and there will be a SID there of some value. If you elevate, run as admin, that SID will jump up by about 1,000, and that kind of reflects the newer security scheme that you're in. You'll also see some things in Process Explorer where it'll say normal integrity versus high integrity, thank you. UI access bumps up, rather than 1,000, it bumps up 100. It's a tiny little thing. And what they use it for is it gives that software access to the entire desktop screen rather than just its own application. That's how something like Snagit is able to grab the entire thing. If the application is installed in a well-known location, by that Microsoft means program files or System32 or the equivalents if you're on a 64-bit system, that elevation is granted automatically without prompting. If the application is anywhere else, that thing in the manifest will cause a UAC prompt because it is an elevation. So that turned out to be a little bit of a problem as I was working with TextBit. They couldn't figure out why they were getting these prompts. We sort of figured it out, and that's because AppV is putting stuff in a separate area. It's going to look like it's the program data. AppV cache is where those files live. So they actually then went back and they made a change to their program to fix that. Temporarily, we were doing some VFS stuff with a launcher to get around the problem, and now they fixed it internally in their product. But that's the kind of example of the kind of thing we like to highlight in here. Notice they also have a couple of device drivers. It turns out those device drivers are only used for, it's like a PDF printer, right, out of the product. And then nobody really uses that feature, so they were like, okay, we're okay with that. Okay, so once we've checked that out, let me go back to here. There's a bunch of other functionality in here. One of the things that we love to do is when we do have a problem, be able to debug it. And in the Debug Packages tab, we have the ability to do things like get at a regedit or a command prompt inside that virtual environment of that package so that we can detect what's going on. And then this last year, I added a runtime analyzer. And the runtime analyzer, I don't have any shots of that. It's kind of like a combination between Process Explorer, Process Monitor, and Expert. So I'm gathering all of the kind of debug information about what's happening with that application together in one shot, and you're able to troubleshoot that application. Probably don't have to use that tool very often. It's only when there's a significant problem with your application you're having difficulty with, then it makes sense to go ahead and run that. All right, so once we have everything all set up, we're going to have to get this thing deployed out. Usually there will be some type of piloting or staging process. I was at a customer at the UK this last year that actually had both of those things. They first staged it and, they first piloted it and then they staged it and then they deployed it. So they had a very lengthy process to be able to push anything out. And quite often, particularly if they're using Configuration Manager, this is a completely different group from the people that package the software. So people package it up and they just kind of throw it over a wall and say, hey, deploy this. Okay. And once it's out, once the software is out, there should be some monitoring, looking for any potential issues early on with that application, if not a regular monitoring. I'm trying to remember when it's supposed to end. Okay. We're also want to be ensuring we get license compliance. What I'm finding a lot of companies are doing is they're not so worried on the initial deployment about the licensing, but they just kind of try to true up by doing some type of monitoring, what's being used. Let's make sure that we have the licenses for that after the fact. What I find is that the ISVs are largely okay with that. What they want to see if they come in and try to do an audit or something like that is they want to see that you've got some process in place to actually ensure that you're staying up on your licensing more than anything else. All right. And then the one part that customers are really bad at is getting rid of the applications. And monitoring can certainly help with that, right? Our applications being used. You can use Microsoft Operations Manager. You can use some things out of Configuration Manager. There's a lot of other products out there, the same ones we talked about early on Discovery. But it's a good idea to make sure that the applications are being used and you're not carrying them forward unnecessarily. Are you all as wiped out as I am today?
We're just listening in awe.
Sure, I'll go with that. All right, so what are we looking for out of the whole process? You know, we're looking for just, you know, success out of this, right? And putting together a process, one of the things we have to be concerned with is that we're not putting a process in just for process space and delaying out your ability to deliver software applications. So, you know, the right level of process for each organization needs to be determined, and they need to put that in place. All right, so if there's going to be a process, you know, who really ends up owning that process, right? Somebody's got to be in charge of this. We talked about having multiple people involved. So, how do you see that working today? I'm going to make you guys work. Come on. Okay. Do you see customers having any type of tooling in place to track these things as they go through? I mean, certainly on a project basis, at a minimum, somebody's got a spreadsheet, you know, tracking the whole thing, right? Do you see other tooling in place today?
Yeah, we've got some customers using App Tracker.
App Tracker?
Yeah. Internally developed tool that plugs into SharePoint as well, which essentially is just a flashy spreadsheet with a red, amber, green kind of status for the wear it out or some life cycle days.
That means some of the stuff we talked about in terms of documentation has a place to live, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very, very important.
Our customers obviously have a tool called usage tracking in our Workspace product.
Okay.
So we do have a tool for it.
So you have a tool?
You were asking for it.
Yeah.
That's okay.
There's also a tool called Sparkle Flow to manage the whole FV process.
Called what?
A Sparkle Flow.
Sparkle Flow.
Yeah, it managed the whole process from the application and then sequencing the application, monitoring, documenting, and publishing it.
It's actually from a company that's it's a third-party packager.
I know that.
Yeah.
It's a Dutch company, right?
Yeah.
It's just
That's of course.
So I've seen many tools to automate or assist in these kind of processes, but the most difficult thing is what happens before, what apps do you actually use, and can I please get them?
Yes.
And the second one is sometimes even more difficult than the first one, because nobody knows where the software is, where the licenses are, and before you have that, the process doesn't even start.
How it needs to be installed. Like that.
Yeah, so you look in the list of applications you need to do, and 90% is on stage one. Get me the stuff.
Yeah, I got a call from my, both of my children worked for me for a while, and then they went off and worked for end customers directly instead. I never wanted to have employees. Just about a month ago, my daughter called me up and said, "Hey, do you know where I can get a copy of Access 95? I need to package it, and we can't find a copy here."
Hold on, let me search in my floppies.
She found one on eBay. But yeah, there is an awful lot of that. I was at a customer, it was a newspaper, and I went down and I normally only work with a customer for 1 week, but in this case they begged and begged, and it was earlier in my career when I needed more money. So I said, fine, we'll do a 3-week project. We'll take your top applications and we'll get them through. Give me an itemized list. And the number one item on the list was an app that they used to lay out the newspaper every single day. And we went in, so that's the first one we attacked. And they had instructions on how it was supposed to be installed. It took 2 hours, and 1 hour and 59 minutes into the install, the installer backed up. Said, I'm done. Not gonna work. The app was running on a Windows NT server, so this was about 10 years ago. It was running on NT server. They couldn't get any more parts for the thing, so they needed to migrate it off, and that's what actually drove the whole thing. Every day we tried something, and we'd start up this installer, and we'd go do some other work. We'd come back and we'd find out it didn't work. Yeah, we tried all sorts of things. At one point, we have to do a native install because I don't think you know how to install this thing. So we tried that, the exact same thing happened. Said, all right, maybe you need to contact the vendor for support. Customer got really, really quiet. I don't think we can do that. Oh, why not? Well, we got this from our parent company. We're not sure we're really licensed for it. So I said, okay, fine. Why don't you just P2P that thing, throw it on a VMware server, and let it run under Windows NT, because I don't want to deal with it. And since it's a newspaper who has no money anymore, I'm sure, they're probably still running it today that way. So documentation, and what I've been thinking about this summer a lot is also gathering the information about this application. I think we've been able to learn a lot more about applications in these last few years. Quite frankly, because AppV switched over and what they're doing today really helped highlight all of those interface points to me. So I've been playing around with some software, which is really just a prototype, and I'm actually just kind of hoping to spur the community in the form of vendors who may happen to be here to start thinking about this. All right. So this is one of the 2 prototypes I built to kind of walk through the whole process. So the way that I ended up building this thing is a basic framework with a whole bunch of plugins. And the plugins represent the different stages that might be in play for this particular application or for that enterprise in general. So there's kind of placeholder plugins in here, and then we can replace them out. So like I've added this AppV custom one that allows me to bring in more data. And then ultimately, this is, the idea is that this is for use in kind of managing that whole project, right, from the beginning. So, do we have the requirements in from the business unit? And I've kept it real simple here. It's just checkboxes. Have we done our work here, right? So this would kind of be the dashboard for the guy who's managing this whole project. And items could be assigned to different people. But we can get a lot fancier. So as we go in, we look at the AppV one. What I've done is I've taken the analyzer out of AppV Manage and brought it in. So we would actually inspect the package and bring it in. So if you think about having a junior packager or third-party packagers doing your packaging, you would be bringing that in, bringing it here, and then this is where you'd start to see, oh, are there things, did they do the job right? So are my shortcuts, do they look right? Are there any issues there, like this one here? Oh my goodness, there's an icon there that looks kind of weird, right? Is that what I'm supposed to see? Are there the COM components? So are there out of process COM components? And did they do the checkbox to say, oh, I want to publish those out so that they get visibility into this other app that may need it, right? So we get to see those kind of things. If it's a 3264-bit scenario, do I have the right bit combinations for where I want to deploy to? Because a lot of times the installer is going to look at the bitness of the operating system and say, oh, I'm only going to drop the 32-bit components because I'm on a 32-bit machine. You get the 64-bit machine, now you don't get your shell extensions and things like that because it's the wrong bitness. So those are the kinds of things that I've been playing with there. And I've sort of been extending some of the testing that's there. Oh, this is for a smaller screen. That's interesting. I don't even know how to, I don't have a scroll bar on this. I've never worked on it. That's important. So that down at the bottom are some of the things that AppE doesn't support that we normally don't think about. There's very rare that they show up. So things like WMI providers, entries that might be in the scheduled tasks. Now, most of the time, those things are actually auto-updaters, so I'm kind of glad that AppE doesn't support them out of the box. The device drivers, and also ODBC registrations, because sometimes we have to worry about making sure that we're not hiding locally deployed ODBCs connectors. That's typically what I see. They want to have the package done without the connector in there, and then deploy the connector externally. That way they can talk to a staging database or a production database and not have to repackage as they go along. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. I don't know, does something like this make any sense? Does the enterprise need something like that?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah. I think what would be really handy is to have a business level dashboard at the front. So you know, you had in the first screen you had the progress.
Yeah.
So you had, this is what stage each application is at.
Yeah.
What often happens is the project guys have to explain why the hell they've only done a third of the users, because all the apps are stuck in this kind of setting. So having like a business level dashboard you could give to the senior management to say, look, in really simple terms, this is where all the application stages are. Does that make sense?
It does. Let's see if...
Yeah, so that kind of stuff. Excellent.
This is the
But
first
in the
prototype
pie
that
charts.
I've thrown away. And this was attempted to be that kind of simple, and yeah, these are just buttons, you know. You hit to say, okay, change it, and then it would make a nice flow chart kind of for, you know, here's where we're at, here's where we're hung up.
Yeah, because often the apps get packaged and they get stuck at UAT, and then they all start piling up because the customer hasn't got the resource from the application experts to put them
Okay,
in UAT.
okay, so this is a one application. You need a fuller view of everything that's in the project and show that this is where it's, okay, that makes some sense. Yeah.
Maybe with some sort of mail capability, so you can use mail to jump from one stage to the next. Use the sending of the mail as a sort of transfer point or something like that.
Okay. You know, it's funny, in the prototype I put in, as we register the different people get assigned to, I put in a place for the email field, but I sort of felt like, no one's going to really want to do that. That's interesting. You call that out, okay. What about links into other systems that they have? I mean, what would be needed? Because you're probably not going to replace the entire process you have today. This is something that's going to augment it and have to fit in with what you're doing.
Yeah, probably plug into CMDB application database. In the Netherlands we use Topdesk a lot.
Topdesk.
Yeah. Where also application lifecycle lives. Probably make a connection with that. You know, that you can see that the application X has gone from version this to that.
Stretching. I saw a hand go with 5 fingers up, but it turned out he was stretching. So.
Well, one thing that customers will find very useful, because you mentioned CMDB, most customers say they have one and they don't have one. So any data that's going to be able to populate or help create a CMDB would really help. Any output data from him.
Yeah, one of the
Obviously not your customers.
Sorry?
All your customers are fine, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I'm saying I love about where I don't know that there's value yet today, but in taking the kind of data that I showed, wrong one, that I showed, let's see, the data that we have here and throwing it in the database could allow us to do things in the future. So by getting the information, there's my 5 minutes, into the database, we may be able to do things. So I hooked up a little example here. I don't really have functionality in the prototype for this, but I can go into SQL and take a look at the database. So one of the things that we found that AppV has forced us to take a look at is there's a problem with a lot of VC runtime components inside the packages. They don't work, they need to be deployed separately. So Microsoft put in a fix to detect those things, and they will publish them out when they publish the package. That solved the problem. It was great. But for any company that's really serious about security, like anyone in the financial industry, healthcare, a lot of government places, it's a problem, okay? And here's the problem. So Microsoft has all of these VC runtimes, and they're deployed as side-by-side components, meaning they all get to live together. So when you install VC 2005, and then SP1, and then security fix for SP1, these things all live in there, and the application manifests say, I want to work with this particular version. If that version's there, they get it. If not, it'll look for a slightly newer version. Well, 2005 SP1 has some well-known security flaws in it. That's why there were security updates to it. The installers for the security updates actually go in and remove the components that had the security flaw as part of it. So they're actually replacing. And that's great as long as the order of installation is that SP1 gets put on and then the security fixes. We put these things in packages, and now you happen to capture SP1, that gets deployed out. If it happens to get deployed after the security fix got put on, you now have both components on there. And the one with the flaw will be being used by that application and potentially others. So our practice has been keep them out of the package, right? So one of the things I did here, just hit run, right? There we go. Make this fuller screen, and we'll zoom in. So I just did a query against the database. I ingested, I think, about 75 packages in here. And take a look and see, okay, who's got the bad version in there? So anything that's 8.0, 50727, anything lower than, I think, .900 as the extension there, that's either the original 2005 or the SP1. And so we can quickly find that. So if there's suddenly some new security flaw that hits, having that kind of information about, okay, what applications are involved with this, let me find out, and let me try to get that remediation in place right away. This is the kind of thing I think can be helpful going forward. Yes, no? Yeah, do you see other things that might be useful that way? That's kind of where I'm at. I sort of feel like there's going to be something useful in here, but other than this one example, I don't have it yet. So, but that's kind of where I've been thinking about. I did want to hit a couple of other topics up here. Talk about AppV and layering and containers. Okay, so containers are the new big buzzword. Microsoft's implementation of containers, quite honestly, is an adoption of what they learned from AppV. Okay, when they put a container up, if you take a look at the operating system, in fact, let's just go and do that here. Oh, I need to do run again, and I can't do it from there. I have to do a command prompt with run as admin for this to work. But we can do FLTMC, and we can see all the filter mode drivers that are loaded on this machine. There's a couple of new ones that show up in Windows 10 called WCNFS and WCIFS. That's the container implementation in the operating system, and it's very similar to the AppV VFS and AppV, well actually it's similar to the AppV VFS, and from what I can tell, one is dealing with registry and one's dealing with the file system. And it's just built into the operating system now. And they're using that same technique of catching the registry and file requests as they come down and redirecting them to do something else, and that's how they're doing that sandboxing. The thing with containers is, what does everyone say about containers? They're fast, right? Okay. We need to define what fast means. So if Sasa here is time 0, and we have a timeline coming across the room, right? We have containers. But what are containers fast compared to spinning up a VM, which is like out in Claudio's room, right? That's what fast means. It still takes quite a bit of time. How long does it take to start up Outlook, let's say, which is a pretty good sized application? Well, that's still over here. It's not over there. It takes a while to get that container up. And it's not just the container. The container is this base piece. You built that container using an exact copy of the OS image that you're running on. It's not actually being copied and spun up at this point, but you build your container with that exact version. So if you have to patch the OS, you got to patch your container stack as well. What you're doing is you're actually just kind of layering in an application middleware. And when the container spins up fast, but now you've got to get these other layers in here. So if you're doing a layering technology in there or some way that it can immediately find it, that's great. If what you're doing is file copy type of stuff, that can take a while. If this middleware is IAS, which it would be on the server case, you still got to wait 1.5 seconds for IAS to spin up. So there's additional time on there. It's a lot less than booting an entire VM, but you just kind of need to be aware of that. When people say fast, you have to understand what it's fast relative to. We have seen containers on the desktop operating system for Windows 10. I haven't figured out really why. My primary theory is that it's there for developers so that they can quickly just test right there. But Microsoft did use it as part of Project Centennial, which is they're now called the Desktop Bridge. They actually use it as a way to do the packaging of that application. So they'd spin up a container and they would copy the installer into the container, run it along with some other software to do captures, and then when they were done, they'd copy all this stuff back out. Sort of an interesting kind of a process, not a fast one, but an interesting process and way to do that. So I think Microsoft is playing around with a lot of these things, and I think we're going to see more combinations of redirection and isolation in the future that could prove quite interesting. So I see Claire is here. I think that means my time is up. So thank you, and let's continue to talk.
Sure.